Greetings, adventurers! Welcome to the Skill Tree Tavern! That's right, I finally decided to live every man's dream and open my own bar. I've got everything one can want. Nice ambiance, various liquors, but I am missing one really key component to a tavern, as far as I'm concerned. And that, my tipsy travelers, is some fun tavern games. I just think there's nothing like that vibe of like people sitting around, having drinks, playing cards, or dicing. I love that vibe. I think it's so cool. But I'm also very cheap, so I'm not gonna buy said tavern games. No. We're gonna make them. So that's today's episode. Today we're gonna make 4 fancy fun times for our tavern. Now this is gonna employ various skills. There's gonna be some woodworking here, some bones, some leather. We're going ahead. So Maddie, whatever you decide to put, let's level up this skill. I wonder if she put anything. Who knows? I like to challenge her every once in a while. You know what I mean? Now, of course, we could go ahead and just put like any kind of games down, but I really wanted to veer towards the old or the ancient even. It just kind of fits that vibe better. I mean, I even have some knuckle bones here, which are really cool, actually. We had a lot of fun with these the last LARP I went to. But yeah, one game I found that totally fits this mold is one called Nine Men's Morris. Nine Men's Morris is an old game. Like, they played it in Rome old. I mean, ancient Rome. Rome is still a thing. They play lots of games in Rome. When in Rome. But you know what I mean. Don't get smart with me. Now, there's some really good tutorials on how to play this game. I'll link to this one that I learned from in the description below. I just want to resist going over the rules for every game because each one could probably be a video by themselves. Anyways, we're not just making any board, we're making one with a twist. Is that a coin pouch? No, it's a game board. Let me show you how I did it. I started with this nice supple piece of chrome tan leather here. You definitely want to go with a leather that's as fabric-like as possible. I've made boards before out of a stiffer leather, and though it will like close up in on itself, the leather tends to like fold and want to stay that way if it's too thick. Now to cut out the shape of the thing, I just went ahead and plopped this platter right on top. You can use anything that's a big enough circle for your board. This is just the biggest thing I had. With that all drawn out, I went ahead and cut it with my scissors, leaving me with this nice big circle. For this one, it ends up being over 1 foot in diameter. The only reason it would matter is once it bunches up. If it's too small, there's not gonna be enough room for that leather to close, right? I definitely wouldn't go too much smaller than 1 foot. Let's put it that way. Now in the past when I've made ones like this, I made this one in fact, I used my laser engraver to put the imprint on to actually get the image onto the leather. But I realized a lot of you don't have access to a laser engraver and I want to make this as easy as possible. Well, sort of, because I also want to make it look as good as possible. Now you can totally put this on with like leather paints if you're good at doing that, or with a Sharpie if you're good with a Sharpie. It'll totally stay on. For my purposes though, I decided to make a stencil first. Now you can make this out of anything. You can print it first on printer paper and just kind of cut it out and then tape it afterwards. But since I have a Cricut cutter, I just went ahead and cut this stuff out of this purple vinyl here. This makes it really easy because I can just remove all the little bits that I don't need, leaving me with the image that I'm actually going for. So with all those bits and pieces I don't need removed, I just use some of this transfer tape just to keep everything together and all in one piece. Now I really wanted to make sure everything lands centered, and luckily with the Nine Men's Morris board, there's like a line that goes right down the middle. So all I did was I folded that piece of leather in half and then lined that line up with the crease. Once I was sure that was stuck into place, I opened the whole thing up and just smoothed out my template. Now if you're just printing this out on a piece of paper or you're cutting it out of a piece of plastic or something, definitely don't need it to be sticky or like a vinyl. All you would have to do is put it in place and put some masking tape so it didn't move, and then instead of using what I'm gonna use here, which is gonna be an airbrush, you can just put some dye or some paint on like a little dauber brush and just daub it gently. Just make sure you don't overfill it so that it doesn't bleed underneath the thing. But as I said, for my case, after I removed the plastic film, I just hit the whole thing with my airbrush gun. This made it super quick and easy to lay down a lot of paint. Then once it was dried, I simply peeled away all of my vinyl to expose my masterpiece. I first used this method when I was making my apron, which is right here, and I'm always stunned at how good, like how crisp all of the lines come out. Everything looks perfect. Even my little skill tree in the middle. All right, so at this point we have like a leather game board. To make it into like a little carry-along pouch, I first used my wing dividers to walk all along the edge, leaving me with little marks. I then went back in with my hole punch and punched out all of those little marks, giving me spaces I'll be able to thread some cordage through. Now because this is a large-ish pouch and the leather itself is on the thinner side, I wanted to reinforce that so it wasn't just pulling against the leather. So to make that happen, I just busted out these grommets here. Using these, I went around the perimeter and pushed those grommets into my holes. Into the holes, not my... Carry on. To make these stay, I just use the recommended hammer and anvil. The anvil has a cool little indentation that the grommet sits into. And then the hammer side of the equation is rounded and will mushroom out that back side. It only takes a few blows to get this thing exactly where I need it so it won't fall back out of that hole. And as you can see, once you get a flow, it only takes a few minutes to get this whole thing done. For my cordage, I'm just using this strip of leather that I had laying around. Using that, I just laced it in and out of each one of those eyelets. Now, not only does that really look cool when it's open, but when I pull on that cordage, the whole thing closes up into this neat little pouch here, which I love. I love being able to just kind of carry my game with me and bring it to a tavern and play. Though you're not gonna get much done with just the board, you're gonna need some game pieces to play with. Now, I can go ahead and make those, but there's so many things you can use as game pieces, I figure, why? So for this one, I just busted out this little jar of decorative pebbles I have that usually go in like a plant vase or something, and separated out 9 white ones and 9 of these darker black ones. And with that, we have all we need to play this game. And once we're done, you simply pull on the straps, close everything up, and you've got yourself a traveling tavern game. I love this. I love the portability of it. I like that it keeps all the pieces contained somewhere. I think that's really slick. Not only that, but once you're done playing, all you have to do is pull on the cordage, and now you have a little pouch with everything in it. Oh, I love that. I love when everything's all self-contained. It's cool. It'll fit right on your belt when you go from tavern to tavern. So cool. So while getting into this, I realized that there's something like fundamental that I'm missing. And that is just dice. Let's take a step back. I have dice. I have lots of dice. But the problem is they're either like purple with swirls on it or something because I'm a D&D nerd, or they're these like cheap plastic dice, and I don't know, it just kind of takes me out of it. Not only that, but I've always wanted some like bone dice, right? Really nice, old looking, kind of period correct dice. So I figured, since we're doing all this here, let's make us some dice. Can't be that hard. For the actual bones for this dice set, I just stole these little cow bones from my dog. Don't tell him he'll be very cross with me, and now he has a full set of armor, so he's a formidable foe. Now with these bones, there's only a portion of it that'll actually work out. There's only some that's thick enough to make dice out of. So once I assessed which side I was gonna be cutting, I just used my bandsaw to square off one edge of it so I had a nice flat area there, and then cut out the rest of that meaty bit. This gives me this little chunk o' bone to work with. There was just a small matter of setting my guide on that bandsaw to be 1/2 of an inch away from the blade. Doing that, I'm able to just run the bone into that space, turning the piece every pass, which will give me a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square. Then I just go back in long ways and cut them so that they're small cubes. Now, because of how little of the bone material is actually thick enough to do this, I was actually only able to get 2 usable sized pieces. But they're exactly 1/2 of an inch by 1/2 of an inch by 1/2 of an inch. 1/2 of an inch cubed, if you will. And I will, because it's a cube. That said, for some games I'd want to play like Liar's Dice, 2 isn't really enough, right? Like, I'll have a nice little set of bone dice, but I really want like maybe 5 more than that. So I decided to try another material out as well. Specifically, this block of alabaster I have. I went through a phase where I really want to learn how to carve stone, and it's just been sitting there for years. Anyways, the nice thing about this stuff is it cuts, honestly, easier than the bone does. I just went ahead and squared off the face of this. Then just like with the bone, I set my guide to 1/2 of an inch and ran that slab through again, giving me these little pillars that I can work with. Then it was a simple matter of just running it back through to get my cubes. And doing this made it super easy. I was able to bust out a whole bunch of those. The only thing I don't know for certain is it is a softer material, right? So if it like falls onto concrete or something, how bad is it gonna get marred up? We'll see. It's a work in progress. Once I had all these good to go though, I just hit them on some sandpaper to get rid of all of my tooling marks. Then I continued on with some sandpaper, getting more and more fine with each grit. Doing this with both the bone and the alabaster left me with this beautiful little shiny stock to work with. The bone is perfectly smooth and looks super clean. The alabaster looks like little chunks of ice, which is so cool. From there was a simple matter to just bust out my Dremel and mark out the pips. Using a Dremel with a rounded head made this super easy, giving me the perfect shape that I'm looking for. And look at how dope all these little pips look. It looks so good. That said, I wanted them to be black. I didn't want them just to be marks, so I needed to fill those with some kind of a paint. I wanted it to be something that was fairly waterproof, wasn't just gonna wash away if you like spilled your beer on it or something. And I figured the perfect solution to this is actually just some nail polish. This black nail polish will work perfectly. All I did was smear it upon the face of the dice, making sure enough got into those little pips. Then I simply wiped all the excess away on a paper towel. This left only the pips full of the nail polish, and look at how clean that is. That looks so good. This simple method got me completely done with all of these dice in just a matter of like 10 minutes. And look at how stupid cool these are. Like, I made these dice. I've always wanted to make dice. It's a simple project, but I've never done it before. And though the alabaster ones are really cool, and I've rolled them a few times, and they do kind of mar up a little bit, but it adds to the flavor of them. I think that's neat. The bone dice, though, those are my favorite. I'm gonna make a bunch more of these. Not only are they like, the weight is nice, the shine to them, they have like this marbling that comes from the bone. Oh, they're now like, they're my favorite dice. I love them so much. I'm gonna create a character that's specifically a gambler just so I can have these dice on me at all times. I love them so much. And dice fit in. They're like one of the oldest gaming implements we have, so I'm really glad to have made some of these. That being said, if we want to get truly ancient with our games, like have something that really like sets the bar here, then there's no other alternative but the royal game of I suppose Senate too. Senate's really old, but is like old. Check out this video here featuring Irving Finkel. I love him so much, by the way. Watch a few minutes of it and you'll realize why. He's fantastic. But it goes over the general rules of the game and everything. Needless to say, this is a really old game and it's really actually a lot of fun. I like playing this game. Now, to make the actual board for this thing, I decided I was going to use a whole bunch of little cut off pieces of wood. I'd love to show you how I took square pieces of wood and I cut them all where I want them, but I just had this box of cut off squares. I've had these for no lie, like 15 years I've been saving them to be able to use them. I throw nothing away. But I was working with a contractor where we were making like, the handrails for some stairs or whatever, and the balusters going up were too long, so we needed to trim off like an inch worth of them on every single one of them. So I've had these inch mahogany blocks with me for just ever. All I did was select the best ones that I liked and put them together into the board shape so I knew everything fit. Again, really simple shape. It's just made up of a bunch of squares. If you have a bunch of squares cut, you just kind of configure them how you want them. From there, I just picked them up in rows first and added some glue along the side that would touch. I kept going down the line, adding glue to the rows just where it would touch other blocks. Then I went back in it and grabbed them in columns and did the same thing. Just make sure you make those glue ups nice and even, and don't be stingy with the glue. You want enough so it comes out of the little joints once you push them together. And made sure everything was nice and clean so I wouldn't accidentally glue my clamps to it. Once that was good, I added some of these extra blocks in here just so I could actually clamp into this space. Then I added clamping pressure to the sides, as well as from back to front. This I just left alone for 24 hours to cure totally. Once that was good, I removed my clamps and used a mallet just to hit those little blocks that were tightly wedged out. As you can see, my little game board is all taking shape now. From here, we're gonna sand down and work out any imperfections or anything that's like higher than it should be. But first, I wanted to show you this cool clamp I have. It's just this kind of little metal hook here. To use it, you just need a hole in your table. All you do is position the piece where you want it, slide the end of that clamp into the hole, and just hit it with a hammer. This is a super old style clamp and I really love it. It's so cool. Once the piece was all secured, I just used my belt sander and evened out that whole surface. When it's time to turn that piece around, you can't just pull the clamp out, you gotta tap it a little bit on the backside and it instantly lets go. The physics there makes me happy. That's so cool how that works. Once I had everything evened out with that aggressive tooth of the belt sander, I went back in with my random orbital sander and 120 grit sandpaper just to make it nice and smooth. Okay, from here we have a nice smooth surface, but I really wanted to like demarcate where each one of those little vectors were, right? So you can see all the squares more clearly. To do that, I just went back in with my Dremel and traced those lines where the blocks meet, setting a nice groove into place. Doing this really defined those squares and made them stand out. Next, I wanted to get all the markings on the board. Now, some of the ones they've recovered, like in archaeological digs or whatever, they have a whole bunch of markings on them that like nobody knows what they do. Really, there's only one one set of markings you need, and that ends up being this little star pattern in the corners and in little various places along the board. So I just set those in and put in some extra little frills just to make it look more visually interesting. Once I was happy with that, I covered the entire thing in a black paint wash. Just like with the dice pips, I really wanted to make sure that that paint got really deep into the little grooves here. Once it was dry, I just went back in with my random orbital and removed all that surface paint. This left me with my squares and my marks all outlined in that black paint, really standing out against the wood. This is when I noticed I did a dumb thing. But it turns out okay, and I'll tell you why. So you'll notice on the longer side here, the squares on this side of the board, I have three little rows. But as you can see with this other one I've made, it's supposed to be 4 rows. I made it a row too short. Which, by the way, check out how dope this other one I made came out, by the way. This one I used the laser engraver to put all the marks in them, and they are the marks that, like, the actual ones that were found in archaeological digs have on them. And I did this one like a few months ago. I actually made this specific board when I first cut those like 15 years ago. I had the board and I had no markings on it until I got that laser engraver and I wanted to try it out. Oh, it looks so good though, doesn't it? Oh God. But like I said, that's okay that I made it one short, because there was variations in the actual game. I even saw one where this little middle row here was like 10 blocks long. It just makes for either a shorter game or a longer game, depending on how much space you have. Because at the end of the day, it's a race game. You're racing the person you're competing against up this little path here, around and back off the board. So if it's shorter, it's a quicker game. If it's longer, it's a longer game. Anyway, with that good to go, I just added some boiled linseed oil to protect my board. So this board was actually played with a really unique set of dice. It was a pyramidal set of dice that were binary. There was either like the little white pips were sticking up or they weren't. You either got it or you didn't. I didn't want to go through making those dice, but there were another set of dice that were popular at the time. To make these, I just ended up grabbing this little wooden dowel here. This I used my bandsaw on to cut exactly in half. This leaves me with a half round with one flat side and one rounded side. I then brought it back over to the bandsaw and cut them in roughly 2-inch increments, leaving me with these 4 half-rounded little sticks. The rounded side I end up just hitting with my torch to blacken them up as much as I could. Now I have a clear demarcation with one light side and one dark side. Happy with that, I hit the whole thing with some boiled linseed oil. So the way these work is you drop them, and whichever sides have the light side up are the sides you get, and the dark side up is nothing. Achieving that binary thing we're talking about, right? So if I drop them and only one is up, I can move 1 space. Now, I will say, if you're using like the longer board, the traditional version of it with 4 spaces there, I'd use the 4 dice. But with the one with 3 spaces, I'd only use 3 dice. Basically, you want that maximum roll there to get you to this little end here. There's reasons for that. As you're racing around, every time you land on one of those stars, you get to roll again. Again, I'm not gonna say all the rules of this game. Irving Finkel in that video I shared totally will tell you all of it you need to know, and in a much more entertaining way than me. Rest assured though, this is a really fun game. Like, I love this game a lot. All right, so let's see. We have some board games, we have some dice. What are we missing? Of course, cards. We can't have a tavern without card games. Come on now. Now, as much as I really want to make cards like my own cards, to do that, I'd love to design the art myself. I'd like to find a way to draw them out and make them nice, and that's gonna take forever. So instead, I decided to figure out a way to make regular playing cards look like they belong in this setting. And that, of course, starts with some cool playing cards. I found these Fey cards put out by Bicycle that have some of the dopest imagery. Little goblins and fawns, and even the numbered cards look really cool. They just look, you know, really new, like bright white, and, you know, they don't fit in yet. To fix this, I bought some of these distress ink pads and this little stamp here. All I have to do is soak up some ink on my stamp pad and then carefully stamp around the edges, feathering that color into the center. Basically, we're making this kind of vignette of grime. The stamp color I'm using here is called Vintage Photo, and I really like the effect it gives. It's really subtle, but when you hold it up next to a card that hasn't been done, you can totally see how much darker it makes it. It gives it this really cool aged effect, like it's been played with 1,000 times throughout the years. This whole process was really simple, and again, the way they come out looks just fantastic. And even once you see them all together, it looks cool. I just feel like it sets that vibe off so much better. Now to really add to that effect and make it feel like these are a well-worn old kind of deck of cards, I went back in with some sandpaper and just kind of fluffed up the edges a little bit. Just giving that feeling of people throughout the years just kind of shuffling them, and where the grime is like where your fingers land when you're trying to pass them out. And again, I really love how these came out. They look cool. My little gambler character, maybe I'll make like a little leather pouch for them. Have this on me, have my bone dice. Oh, it's so cool. I love it so much. In fact, I think this is the character I'm gonna use when I go to Conquest. Now, if you all aren't aware, we're going to Germany to conquest the largest LARP in the world, and there is a great deal if you guys want to come with us. This video here has all the explanation for it, but again, it's a really cool deal, and if we get enough people in our group, 20 specifically, like we have a tavern night where a tavern's just ours with drinks and food and a band, a storyline just for us. Oh, it's gonna be epic, and we're already like halfway there. We got 10 people the last time I checked. So cool. Anyways, I really hope you liked this episode. I had so much fun making it. It was stuff that I've been wanting to make for the longest time, so oh, it's so cool. If you did like today's ep, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't release new content. In the meantime though, tip your waitress, and as always, keep leveling up, you. You stay to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a great way to support this channel. Another great way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and this ship does not sail without them. And I want to give a special shout out to our newest high tier level Patreon members, Michael Register and Ken Richard. I can't express how much it means to me that you guys support this channel and you like what we do here. If you like what we do enough to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can click on one of these over here that YouTube thinks you like, and that'll help too. Well, you do, here's the magic trick. Look at this card. Think about what it is. Are you thinking 4 of diamonds?